Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, founder of GSD Gets You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. The 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. And today at Simplenight Presents, we have a returning guest, Eric Pelletier. And today we're going to talk about the incredible lessons from the Simplenight founders. So I'd like to introduce Eric, and I'm honored to have him here. He's got over 40 years with us, marketing strategy and strategy consulting experiences for companies like as a partner for Bain and Company and a senior partner at Oliver Wyman, focusing on private equity, restructuring, growth strategies, and technology. And today we're going to talk about Simple Nights. With that, I'm going to bring my friend on board. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
It's great to see you. So, could you please briefly share your background and how you've supported companies like Simple Night?
Okay, so my background, as you mentioned, I've been involved in, I've been a strategy consultant for over 40 years. And I started my career at Bain and then did a lot of private equity, did a lot of support for startup companies, really at the strategic level. And I believe our topic is about strategic pivots. And this is really where I focused, part of my time, making sure that companies understand what they do. That's business definition, that they make money out of it, business models. And then what doesn't work, we change the strategy, we focus on something else, and that's a strategic pivot.
Yeah, so let's talk about strategic pivots. Why is it important for startups to do those pivots, and how do they feel confident that they're making the right decision? Eric?
So two questions, why and how, and possibly confidence. The When I was at Bain, we kept referring to one of the first clients we had. I think the name at the time was Republic Steel, and that was, I think, the third largest steel producer in the U.S. I think there was U.S. Steel in Bethlehem, or I can't remember the name. But what was interesting is that the Bain recommendation at the time was fairly drastic and said, get out of steel, which is probably the most radical pivot I've ever experienced in my life. So why do you do a pivot? You do a pivot because your strategy is not delivering. For some reason in what you're doing, although it may be very good, very interesting, you may get good feedback, it's just not working. You're not getting the clients, you're not getting the revenues that you need. So what you do is you assess what it is you really have, all the assets you have, and you see what can I do with these assets. And that hopefully creates a new path for you.
And so, what what should startups look for when they're doing their strategic pivot? What's important for them to look for, and how do they measure success?
Okay, the a pivot works for two reasons. One, it's because you have a suite of assets that you can use to do that. You have a technology that you're trying to apply in a field, but actually that technology could go to another field. You have an immensely talented technical group. They're just maybe they're not going after the right product. Maybe let's take the example of Netflix. Netflix, they started as renting out DVDs, and at some stage they realized, well, maybe there is not that much of a future in DVDs, and we should figure out something else. So to do a pivot, you need to have that basis of assets that you can use and recycle to do something else. It's very important because entrepreneurs don't realize that once they've created a company, it's like a living organism. It has value. Even if the company is failing, even if it's not delivering, you've assembled a team of people, you've assembled some assets. So there is really something around it. And if you're still alive, there is always something to do with it.
So you look at it, and these strategic pivots, if you see the market and the market signals change, and then the feedback, sometimes when you go down through and work with a customer and they start to see your product or service, it's entirely different, right? And then the other thing is, hey, listen, 3 years ago, people weren't talking about um, open AI and ChatGPT and large language models. Things have changed, right? So if you don't refine your business model and you don't go down and change it, you're not going to be a sustainable business, right? And the probability of success goes way down. Some people call customer development, right? You do your customer development to assess the customer and see if your assumptions are right, and then you change it.
Yeah, I think I know we talk extensively about feedback loops and customer exploration, customer development, customer understanding, but that's essential. This is your almost your only source of data, plus knowing the state of technology, of course. Let me take an example. I don't know if you remember how YouTube got started. It
Yeah,
was
they
a
did.
date.
I remember they did there was a zoo, San Diego Zoo, and they were down there looking at elephants, I think, right?
Yeah, but that's at the beginning. Even before that, they were a dating site,
Uh-huh.
online dating site. And then they figured out that people really like to present themselves with videos. So they had to work on the technology to support that, which was very unique at the time. There was no bandwidth problem, et cetera, et cetera. And then, okay, we know where they are today. So that's the whole point: is you listen to your customers, and you realize that and this is why I always go back to business definition. You have your vision of the product, and you're locked in your vision because you've taken so much effort to get there. But maybe people are buying what you do for very different reasons, and it's essential. So this is the customer exploration trip, trying to figure out what it is that people really enjoy with your product. um,
So
and
what kind of go
yep.
go ahead, Eric.
No, go.
No, but so you look at what advice do you have for startups hesitant about pivoting? Sometimes they're afraid, right? So what do you do? How do startups know that what they're doing is right?
Okay, first of all, they're right to be afraid. They should be. I think at the same time, when you have an emerging business, you should be both very optimistic and very fearful of God. And you need to combine the two attitudes. Um, the main question that a pivot raises is the fact, I know what I'm doing, and why should I change? And especially if I have no guarantees that it's going to work out. Now, if you think about this, when you're in the situation where you're considering a pivot, it's mostly because you don't know what you're doing. You have an opinion of what you're doing, but that opinion is not shared by the market. If it were, I mean, your numbers would be different. The second thing, in many cases, you can look at the trajectory where you're hitting the wall. I mean, your burn rate, or whatever indicators, or you're not getting in the contracts you're expecting. Um, so the pivot in many ways is dictated to you. So the what you have to be aware of is, okay, what are my options? And to figure out your options, it's go back to two things. What is my asset base? And in the asset base, there's obviously customers. And two, what are my customers telling me? So go back to your customers and say, I know I've used the example, but the failure of BlackBerry when they essentially had invented the smartphone, and they had invented WhatsApp with BBM, BlackBerry messaging. Um, it's because they had this very strict vision about what they were selling, very secure system, but this is not the reason why most customers were buying it. So and if they had pivoted in time, the situation would be different with Apple, obviously. So the point behind that is you certainly have no guarantee when you do a pivot. Of course not. But then if you're doing a pivot, it means that the situation is pretty bad in any case. So the notion of guarantee doesn't make sense. What you're looking for is truly a lifeline. The good thing is when you have a company, however small, however fledgling or unstable, you have assets. There is something there. So figure out what to do with these assets.
So, how important is investor communication during the pivot, Eric? And what's your advice for handling investor expectations? Because it may totally be different than what they bought into, right?
Okay. First of all, the question is why did the investors come in? Okay. And they usually come in because they like the technology, they like the product or the service, and they like the people, and hopefully they like you. And a lot of the investors come in on the quality of the founder. So obviously, in many cases, when they invest, they made their due diligence and they have a sense of the product you are pushing. At the same time, if you're not doing well, if the numbers are wrong, they know it, and they probably or almost surely realize that it's not doing well before you do. So this is a time where in many ways they're stuck. They are stuck with you. A strategic pivot is an opportunity for them to avoid a write-off and move the investment in a different direction. But to be able to do that, you need to be very compelling. You need to explain why it's not working, why you're pivoting, how you're doing it, understanding that they might find you a bit of a charlatan because you came up with a story once and now it's a totally different story. But that's, all these companies, all the investors, they've seen pivots. Pivots are nothing new. Most of the big successful companies underwent that. If a lot of the car majors didn't start as car companies.
The bike companies, all kinds of things, right? It was interesting. In Slack, I met with Stuart Butterfield over at Stanford and originally built a gaming company. I heard it right from his own mouth.
Yeah.
And but the game wasn't successful. And the thing that he had is he had this internal messaging tool, which people really liked. And he told me this directly. This is a direct story. So, and it was highly effective. So he said, I don't have anything else to sell. I'll sell this. And so that's where Slack was born. It's amazing. And
yeah, and it can come from many different ways. If you look at Shopify, which is incredibly successful, as a platform, how they started. They were a snowboard store online, and then they were not very successful at selling, snow, whatever, skiing, snowboarding equipment. But it turned out that their platform was pretty cool, and they realized, okay, we can start selling the platform, forget about the products, and now we know where they are. So that's really it's exactly like your Slack story is. As you build a company, you need to build tools, you need to build an infrastructure, and sometimes more of the value is in the infrastructure. And I think our joint experience at EVA is a story, along the same lines.
Yeah, no, you go down through, and if we would have been a little bit later, we could have been open AI.
Yeah. And we had an amazing technology, except at the time we didn't necessarily figure out that it actually was an amazing technology.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was the beginning of everything.
Yeah. So the point to entrepreneurs, okay, failing is okay. The failing is the gist of life until eventually something works. We all know the story about Edison and trying 100 light bulbs until he stole one from someone else. But the fact is, keep trying, and the important thing is figure out what you do, what you have. Um, the to me it's a passionate topic in the sense that I told you I've been involved many years in private equity, and one of the huge questions we had compared to my regular clients, Fortune 500 companies, they would come to me and say, Eric, I don't get it. We've got this shit company somewhere in Alabama. We're losing money. We've actually been losing money 20 years from now. We sell it to KKR or some investment fund, private equity, and a year later it's fully profitable, and they resell it for 10 times the price they acquired it for.
Yeah,
So,
that's amazing, isn't it, Eric? I see those companies.
and you've seen that. This is
I've seen it time and time again. I know a guy, they bought a company for about $32 million, and they sold it 2 years or 3 years later for 180 some $1 million. It was the same as that company. They just got a new building. They dressed up the marketing, right? They didn't do much. They didn't do much else, but they went out and got people interested. And by the way, how do they go out? Where do they find those investors? How do they do it? Is it a network thing, or what do they do? How do they find? Are they, somebody says, I'm looking for a company like this, find it for me.
well, now it's the party is essentially over.
Uh,
uh, the party is over. People know that. It started in the 80s, and it was very simple in the 80s because you had a couple of a few situations. One, assets were incredibly undervalued
mhm.
because at the time you would for accounting reasons, most companies had assets at acquisition value instead of operating value. So you take a building in New York that you bought in 20, it's worth nothing essentially, and then 60 years later it's worth a couple of hundred of millions.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that
It was amazing, actually.
yeah, it was very straightforward. A bit of accounting would tell you these things. The second thing is, it was very difficult in the 80s, it was very difficult to get finance. And this is what Milken did with the junk bonds, which was opening up access to credit, access to finance. And then a lot of these assets, actually, you realize that if you start watering them with money, cash,
Mhm.
they would blossom.
Mhm.
The third thing is just I'm not going to make any friends, but the mediocrity of management in the probably about till year 2000. Well, the difference is that in year 2000, most everybody went to business school, which is not a guarantee of success or of quality, but at least it indicates that you should be knowing a few things. Before that, it was, from that standpoint, it was very simple. Um,
Mhm.
but what's to me the lesson of that, and this is why it ties to strategic pivot, is that people have a hard time understanding the quality of the assets they have. And when you have a fresh look from outside, you see things a person inside wouldn't see. So lesson for founders, for entrepreneurs, is actually, if you can't get your eye to be an external eye, try to get other people to look at and tell you frankly what they see in your business.
No, it's interesting. And so, how do you know if so you're going down through a strategic pivot? Well, first question, not everybody's going to do it because they're going to be afraid to make the pivot, right? Sometimes people, not every person is open to change and they fail. So how do you teach yourself that you should make the pivot, because you're always like questioning yourself, did I make the right move or not?
No, it's like any move that's irreversible. You'll always have that question. To me, it has a lot to do with emotional vesting. When you're a good founder, a good entrepreneur, you tend to be super emotionally vested in what you're doing, and you believe this is the best. To use GSD words, this is the best shit in the world you're peddling, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's emotional vesting. But if you look at successful entrepreneurs, take the example of Elon Musk, they went through a series of companies, and so you realize that their emotional vesting is not in the product, it's not in the service, it's in building up a company, which is great because it can be replicated, whatever the field is. So you need to get yourself in a position where you must understand that you're not building a specific service, you are building a company. This is the real aim. Your financial backers, at the end of the day, they don't really care what you do. They really care about, is it a good company that I can sell and make money out of it. So shift your focus a bit, understand what you're doing, which is building a company, and then it should give you the cold perspective you need to make difficult decisions.
Yeah, to make the right decision. I remember I had lunch with Scott McNeely, the founder of Sun Microsystems, one of them, and he said to me, always go to areas you fear the most, you're going to learn the most. And most people don't do that, but you got to do it. That's part of the adventure, right? And you got to we got to like doing it, not to be afraid of it. So listen, we're coming up to the top of the show. Eric, closing thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
Okay, so people, my email at GSD is on the screen, and I would strongly suggest people reach out. Final thought is, remember, when you're a founder, you're building a company. This is what matters. The field is secondary. Your first thing is you are a gardener. You don't care whether you're planting lilac of roses. You're planting. You're making a garden. The garden is the thing, not what you're planting. So that's number one. The second thing is understand your asset base. Read all these stories. We mentioned a few, but there are actually, I would gather, almost all Fortune 500 companies started very modestly and had a few pivots until they found something that,
Oh, I
that
mean,
actually, yeah,
listen, Jensen from NVIDIA started it. I talked to him directly, right? He started with PC boards.
yeah,
And look at now. I mean, everything changes.
yeah. And then the third thing is we're in a very interesting era. So this is why we probably had Eva a couple or 3 years too early, but the AI is completely redefining the world. It's redefining all the processes. Um, if you're able to get a cold, dispassionate view of what processes will look like with AI, then you have a fighting chance. And this is, I would strongly urge all companies to take that look. And although they need to remember, it's something you learn in IT, and a shitty process once it's automated is just a shitty automated process.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So the point is, if you don't know how the process will evolve, there's no point. So what's happening with AI is that actually tons of processes will disappear and will be replaced by something that's takes 5% of the time and 10% of the money. This is the grail. This is what you have to find and aim for.
No, that's great. Eric, thanks for joining the show one more time. And thanks to all the audience for joining Simplenight Presents. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, everybody.
Gary.